Hello and welcome to another video, and today I'm going to be doing my early 2024 Democratic primary prediction, and I've selected 6 candidates who I think will probably run. There's a pretty good chance that all 6 of these individuals actually do run. We have Nina Turner. She's the presumptive, I'd say, successor to Bernie Sanders for the progressive wing of the party. I'd say that she's probably going to be the successor, at least on national scale. Maybe like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez could take her spot, but I think that there's a good chance that Nina Turner runs, just because AOC is just so young that it wouldn't really be a good idea to run for president at such a young age. So then you have Joe Kennedy III. He's a representative in Massachusetts, and he's actually running for Senate. I think he's probably going to win. So, future senator from Massachusetts, Joe Kennedy. Amy Klobuchar. She's a senator from Minnesota, and she ran for president in 2020. She did pretty well. She got like 5th place in Iowa, and then 3rd in New Hampshire. She was like in 3rd place at some point, I think. She was doing really well with delegates, and then she dropped out before Super Tuesday, which basically was the reason why Joe Biden did so well in Minnesota. So, we also have Stacey Abrams, who's the failed gubernatorial candidate in Georgia. She lost to Brian Kemp, and she's trying to be VP for Joe Biden. I personally think Amy Klobuchar will be the VP. This is assuming that Joe Biden either loses the election to Donald Trump in 2020 or just doesn't run for a second term, which I think is kind of likely. And then Amy Klobuchar, Stacey Abrams, whoever it is who becomes the VP. I'm still thinking that it will be Amy Klobuchar that will be the VP. Regardless of if they win, she'll be in a position to run for president in 2024 if Joe Biden decides that she should be the VP. So, Stacey Abrams, regardless of what happens with Joe Biden, will run for president in 2024. She always likes putting herself into positions where she's very likely to run for president. So I just think it's going to be very likely that she runs. And Andrew Cuomo, the governor from New York, he has been pretty liked around the country, especially by Democrats, for his handling of COVID-19. And he's been looked to as a beacon of hope, so I'm sure he'll run in 2024. And then you have Gavin Newsom, the governor in California. He's been pretty popular, and especially with mainstream Democrats, centrists, moderates, I think that they'll want him to run, and he really has a good shot of winning, especially because he comes from California. It has like 400 delegates, 415, which could be enough to tip the scales in his favor, especially in a crowded presidential race, because 2024 will be kind of similar to 2020, where we had like 30 Democrats running at the beginning. So there are going to be other candidates running like Andrew Yang and Cory Booker, but I really don't think they'll be able to get into a position where they have front-runner status. So these are like the 6 front-runners that we have, and I'm just going to go in order, but eventually I'll just forget like the order by dates because I have no idea how it's going to look like in 2024, and I haven't memorized the dates for the 2020 primaries, but I'll just do the best I can. So Iowa, I think that will go to Andrew Cuomo, mostly because Iowa really is a state that goes to the candidate who campaigns they're the best, who has the best name recognition, the person who is usually presumed to be the front runner, mostly because everybody's pouring in ads into Iowa. Everybody's campaigning there. It's like some campaigns last stand, so everybody's putting resources into the state, and I think that the positive press coverage and just the fact that Andrew Cuomo is so popular will help him in the state. So then New Hampshire, that's the same thing. He will do pretty well there, and the momentum that he gets from Iowa will help him in New Hampshire. Also, it is pretty close to New York, and he does have that northeastern appeal. I don't think Nina Turner would do that well there, but you could see it being pretty close. Amy Klobuchar, she did pretty well there as well. She could get some delegates as well as Joe Kennedy. Gavin Newsom won't do that well, as well as Stacey Abrams. I'm not going to go through the individual delegates, so I'm not going to be making this proportional, so it's like a winner-take-all system, so you could have, like, a candidate, like, only take one state, and it would look like they didn't really do a good job, but they might, like, get second place in many states, but I'm just gonna fill out who I think will win each state, and they'll just get all the delegates. And in Nevada, I think that one would go to Gavin Newsom. I think it's more of a regional advantage that he has, just because he's very well liked in California. I could see some of his appeal in California spread out to Nevada. And Stacey Abrams takes South Carolina. She has an African American appeal. She had a very high African American turnout in Georgia. And I think she, especially in 2024, when like the population, the African American population in South Carolina will be like 40%, and around, I think maybe over 50% of the electorate in South Carolina for the Democrats will be African American. She'll be in a good position to win the state. And now I'm going to go through Super Tuesday. Alabama, the same thing really applies to South Carolina, so I'm not going to really talk about that a lot. California, I think that one would go to Gavin Newsom easily. He has a regional advantage there. He's the governor from there. He's the most familiar with the state. I think that he'd do well there. In Vermont, just because of Bernie Sanders' endorsement, I think Nina Turner would carry the state narrowly. I think she'd do a good job rallying the Bernie voters, so I think she'd take the state. Joe Kennedy would win his home state of Massachusetts. He's very popular there, and I think that he's sort of like an Elizabeth Warren type, who's sort of progressive, but just really isn't. I think he'd be able to carry the state. Minnesota, that goes to Amy Klobuchar. That's her home state. She's a senator from there. I think that might be the only state she takes, but I might be wrong about that as we go forward. Colorado, I think that one would be close, but you could really see Nina Turner take the state, actually. It's a very progressive state, and a lot of the electorate focuses on the legalization of marijuana and issues like that. I think that Nina Turner would do well with the voters there, especially the younger voters, and I think it will be enough to take the state, especially just because she's progressive and the state is very progressive. And I don't know about Utah, I'm not going to fill that one out yet, but I think in Maine, you could have a really tight race between Nina Turner, Joe Kennedy, and Andrew Cuomo, but I think in the end you could have a narrow victory for Joe Kennedy. I think he'd narrowly take the state just because he'd do well with the suburban voters, and the vote in the rural areas would be split, and I think he'd do well around Portland, especially just because he does well in like the Boston metro area. I think he could also have that northeastern appeal, which helps him in Maine. And just because he's an Elizabeth Warren type Democrat, Elizabeth Warren had a pretty good showing, especially when she was not going to win the primary in Maine. So I think that Joe Kennedy would take the state narrowly. And in Tennessee, I think the same thing with South Carolina and Alabama, high African American population, she takes the state. In North Carolina, I think that one's going to be interesting, but I do think that she'll take the state. It will be very close. You could have possibly Andrew Cuomo taking the state, but I think that she'd end up winning there. Virginia, that one's going to be very close. I think you could have Joe Kennedy win there, Andrew Cuomo, or Stacey Abrams, just because it's a very establishmentarian state, and I think that Andrew Cuomo would be able to do well around the DC suburbs around here, and Joe Kennedy would also be able to do that. So I think that Andrew Cuomo would end up taking the state, but it would be pretty close. In Arkansas, I think that one would narrowly go to Stacey Abrams, not as high of an African American population, but there still is a heavy African American presence in the state and that would help Stacey Abrams. Oklahoma, that one's hard. I'm going to go with probably Gavin Newsom, but I could be wrong about this one. Amy Klobuchar could actually take this area. She could do well with more conservative voters. She's a very conservative Democrat, actually. I think she'd take the state. I think that she'd do well with many of the rural voters, and that's kind of her thing. She does really well with rural voters in Minnesota, and I think she could do that. She could do well with Midwestern voters, because the voters in these states, they're not really progressive, actually. A lot of the reason that they actually did go to Bernie Sanders was just because they don't like Hillary Clinton, but you could really see progressives actually doing well in the Midwest, but it would be harder than it was in 2016, just because 2016 would mean that there would be a guaranteed victory for progressives in the Midwest. But I do think that there could still be an opportunity for Nina Turner to actually win in these progressive states, but it would be pretty difficult. Utah is not a progressive state, but Bernie Sanders did actually win here. I do think that Gavin Newsom would take the state. He could do pretty well with the moderate voters here, and I think that he knows his region best, and he could just take many of the states in this region. I think that he has a pretty good appeal in Utah. And the last state is Texas. I'm having a hard time about that one because there's going to be a high Latino turnout, and there really isn't a Latino candidate in here. So I'm trying to think who would actually win here. I think that you could have Andrew Cuomo actually winning here. He does well with minorities, and here I just have this up. This isn't like the only piece of information I'll be using. It's how well he did against Cynthia Nixon in the gubernatorial primary. I think that it's very interesting to look at how he did in New York City, which is a very diverse city, and around the metropolitan area, and how well he did with suburban voters around like Nassau and Suffolk, and here in Westchester and Rockland. It's very interesting. He also did really well with rural voters, but Cynthia Nixon also was able to narrowly lose many of the rural areas, but he still actually did do better there. And I just think that because he does well with minorities, Cynthia Nixon predominantly carried white voters, and I could just tell that because usually urban areas are way more diverse. And look at the margins. Brooklyn, 61 to 38. Staten Island, 73 to 26. Queens, 72 to 27. Manhattan, what was it? That was closer, but it was still a 17-point margin. The Bronx, I'm pretty sure that's like the most diverse part of New York City. It might be Brooklyn, but look at the margin, 82-17. So I do think that he'll be able to get Latino voters in Texas, and he'd win the state. And now we're going to Super Tuesday. Oh, also American Samoa. I'm going to give that to Andrew Cuomo. I think that his good reputation and name recognition would help him, and since it is a minority-filled state, I think that he could do well with the minority voters there. I think they're Pacific Islander voters. I don't really know specifically their ethnic group, but I think that he'd just take the state. Not the state, the territory, sorry. So now we're going to Super Tuesday number 2, and there would probably be some people dropping out. Maybe Nina Turner, maybe Amy Klobuchar, maybe Joe Kennedy. But you'd have Stacey Abrams, Andrew Cuomo, and Gavin Newsom 100% staying in the race. Missouri, I think that would narrowly go to Stacey Abrams, but I could see it going to Andrew Cuomo or Gavin Newsom. In Idaho, or let me do North Dakota first. North Dakota would easily go to Amy Klobuchar. You could see a three-way race in Idaho between Amy Klobuchar, Gavin Newsom, and Nina Turner, but I do think that Gavin Newsom would narrowly take the state. Then in Mississippi, Stacey Abrams would take the state. Washington, you would see Gavin Newsom taking the state, but it would be close. Nina Turner would do well. Nina Turner would do pretty well there. She'd get Pramila Jayapal's endorsements, but I don't think it will be enough. And the last state is Michigan for Super Tuesday number 2, and this one will be pretty close, but I'm actually going to give it to Nina Turner. I think that she'd really do well around Ann Arbor, and she'd also improve with African American voters, where Bernie Sanders actually lagged. She'd do well around Detroit, actually. I don't know if she'd win there, but I don't think Stacey Abrams would be able to do as well as Nina Turner, and I think that it would be the thing that kept her in the race, just her victory in Michigan. I think it will be unexpected. And now we're going to Super Tuesday number 3. Before I do that, I'll fill out Democrats abroad. I think Nina Turner would just take Democrats abroad, just because Democrats abroad are usually way more progressive than Democrats in the nation. You have many of the Democrats who are abroad living in social democratic areas, and they'd probably want somebody who's a social democrat winning in the election in the United States. So you could have Nina Turner taking Democrats abroad. And the Northern Mariana Islands, I really don't know about that one. I'm trying to think, but you could probably have Andrew Cuomo taking it for the same reasons that I gave American Samoa to him as well. So now I'm going to go to Super Tuesday number 3, and I'm going to start off with Arizona. Arizona would probably go to Gavin Newsom, but Andrew Cuomo could take the state as well, possibly. In Ohio, I think that Ohio would be very close, but in the end, I do think it would go to Andrew Cuomo, actually. Illinois, that one could go to Stacey Abrams, actually, but maybe to Nina Turner. I don't know about that one. I'm going to give it to Stacey Abrams, actually. And in Florida, that one would easily go to Andrew Cuomo. I think that he'd have the minority appeal, he'd do better with the Southern voters, and it isn't a very African-American state, actually, so Stacey Abrams wouldn't do that well. He could do well around the Panhandle. Maybe Nina Turner does better with the voters here, but I do think that in the end, Andrew Cuomo would take the state. From this point forward, I don't really know the exact dates, just because I probably would if there wouldn't be any problems with COVID-19 and states postponing their elections, but I'm just going to try my best. So, Wisconsin, I'm going to give that to Nina Turner, actually. And Georgia, I'm going to give that to Stacey Abrams. In Wyoming, I'm going to give that one to Amy Klobuchar. And Montana, whatever, I'll just fill that in. Gavin Newsom gets Oregon. Alaska goes to Nina Turner, as well as Hawaii. The Virgin Islands go to Stacey Abrams. The population is like 77% African American. I don't know if probably Caribbean American. I don't think it would be African American, but it's a very it's a African Caribbean territory. I don't know why it's still part of the United States, but it's just a territory. And I think that you take the territory. In which state is next? Probably like Kansas. Kansas, you could see that one going to Amy Klobuchar. Same thing with Nebraska. And now I'm just going to fill in the Northeast because I know that the primaries were supposed to be around early May to late April, something like that. Late April to early May. Andrew Cuomo takes New York. And then you have probably Andrew Cuomo also takes New Jersey. Joe Kennedy, maybe he takes Rhode Island or Connecticut. Probably Connecticut, and then maybe Rhode Island goes to Nina Turner, but probably not. I'm just going to give that to Joe Kennedy. Delaware, that goes to Stacey Abrams. Same thing with Maryland, and also Washington, D.C. Over 50% of Washington, D.C. is African American. South Dakota goes to Amy Klobuchar. Pennsylvania, I'm not going to fill in yet. New Mexico, that would go to the person with the best Latino appeal, and that would probably be Andrew Cuomo. And in Kentucky, I don't think that's going to go to Stacey Abrams. Maybe it goes to Gavin Newsom or Andrew Cuomo. I'm going to give it to Andrew Cuomo. West Virginia, that one would probably not go to a progressive, especially just one that can't really relate to the coal workers there. You'll probably actually have Amy Klobuchar or Andrew Cuomo taking the state. I could actually see Amy Klobuchar doing well in West Virginia, actually. I think that the fact that she's a kind of, not progressive, but actually conservative Democrat will help her there. In Indiana, I'm going to give that to Andrew Cuomo. Louisiana goes to Stacey Abrams, and I'm still thinking about Pennsylvania, so I'll just fill in Puerto Rico and Guam. Guam goes to Gavin Newsom. I don't really know the territory well. It could go to anyone, actually. But Puerto Rico, that goes to Andrew Cuomo. And then Pennsylvania, I don't really know about this state, but to be honest, it's pretty likely to go to Andrew Cuomo. So I'm sorry for not really giving that much of a reasoning, but just because the video is going on for so long, I don't want to bore everybody, so I could really see how this does not turn out to be the actual map. I could be so off that it's laughable, but I guess this is my prediction for even like 4 years away from the 2024 Democratic primary. You have Andrew Cuomo actually winning. I think he'd win with the superdelegates. So, yeah. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.